Ireland has a very old hemp industry. We've one of the oldest hemp industries in Europe with a complete supply chain. So we have farmers and processors and retailers here, stretching back to the 1970s, but a complete supply chain from the early 90s.
That's Chris Allen, Executive Director of the Hemp Federation of Ireland. This is the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. My name is Eric Herlock, and today, March 17th, St. Patrick's Day, we're going to take a trip to Ireland and hear about the hemp industry there. But it's not all leprechauns and rainbows as you might expect. Chris Allen tells us how the government is making things very difficult for the industry and for farmers, and how the government is trying to hand off the industry to the pharmaceutical companies. Plus, we'll hear from Jonathan Miller at the US Hemp RoundTable about why marketing Delta-8 THC as a hemp product is bad for the hemp industry. But first, a few nuggets of hemp news right after this message from our sponsor, IND Hemp. IND Hemp is currently seeking summer interns for an exciting opportunity in Montana this year. Are you or someone you know a college student majoring in agricultural economics, mechanical engineering, or agronomy? Well, this is a great opportunity to learn about the fiber and grain side of hemp, and then take that knowledge home with you to help build the hemp industry in your community. IND Hemp is committed to a diverse and inclusive working environment and encourages anyone with an interest in hemp fiber and grain to apply. Go to indhemp.com to learn more. All right, some nuggets of hemp news this week. All right, here's one from Hemp Today. Headline reads, Specialized Harvester Hopes to Tap Growing Interest in Fiber. The story says that a Canadian company is bringing specialized fiber hemp harvesting technology to North America, anticipating continued expansion of applications for the hemp plant stalk and expanding hemp fields worldwide. British Columbia-based Forever Green, which is providing specialist farming equipment maker Laumitris, from Lithuania, providing them with global sales support, and is now taking orders for the KP-4 fiber hemp cutter. The harvester can mow down hemp fields at up to 12 miles per hour, taking a swath of 9 feet. Here's a story from Australia. This is in Hemp Gazette. Headline reads, Do Hemp Farms Stink? It's written by Stephen Gawthrinett. Some residents living close to a trial hemp crop in Red Cliffs, Victoria, are reporting headaches resulting from the smell, but others say the smell doesn't concern them. iHemp Victoria is the officially recognized trade association for industrial hemp in the state. The organization's president, Darren Christie, said he had never heard of these sorts of complaints, and trial crops have been grown around Victoria for the last 15 years. But Mr. Christie notes some varieties can have a strong odor while others don't. Sometimes unpleasant smells and agriculture go hand in hand. For some people, the smell of cow manure doesn't bother them. For others, it's a special sort of torture. And it's probably the same for hemp. The smell can be particularly strong when the plant is flowering, so it should be a temporary issue. But that's easy to say when not impacted by the odor. The folks affected at Red Cliffs seem supportive of hemp per se, they just want it growing somewhere else away from houses. There doesn't seem to be any particularly bad feeling between the parties at this stage, and that's great, but a solution is needed before that changes. As hemp becomes more commonplace in Australia as it has done in the USA, issues such as odor will need some serious attention. On a related note, 5 tribal fiber crops are being grown in the state this year, according to iHemp Victoria. iHemp Victoria says that new and experienced farmers have made the decision to all use the same seed variety to maximize their success, as the particular variety is very stable. From east to west and from north to south, each crop was robust and consistent. Oh, Australia. Okay, from Australia to Africa, here is a story from Malawi. This is in the Nyasa Times, and it's written by Philip Pasula. And the story says, some individual hemp growers in Mzimba are threatening the government with legal action for failure to issue them with licenses. The prospective cannabis farmers claim that they have invested 30 million kwacha in the industrial hemp farming. Umbelwa Investment Limited spokesperson Reverend William Mumba said Saturday in Mazuza that delays to issue licenses are frustrating. He said the government should issue them with the licenses. He says, "We are extremely concerned as farmers because we have invested a lot into this venture. We had all the trust in our government that they would fulfill what was promised because it is about the country's economy. It's very unfortunate the government does not seem to be concerned, and this is where we think we might consider mobilizing ourselves to force government to refund the money. If government issued the licenses, farmers from Mazimba alone would bring into the country approximately $2 billion. This would certainly help to boost the economy of the country, explained Mumba. Another concerned farmer, Martin Kumwenda, wondered why an initiative conceived by government itself was also being hindered by the same government. All right, well, I hope this works out for you all in Malawi. I just can't imagine, a government getting in the way of progress. Speaking of which, here's a story from hempgrower.com. Headline reads, DEA calls out hemp in latest drug threat assessment report. The agency claims hemp is being used as a cover-up for illicit cannabis operations. This is written by Teresa Bennett, and it says that in its annual National Drug Threat Assessment Report, the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, the DEA, calls out hemp production as a way for drug trafficking organizations to cover up illicit cannabis operations. The hemp industry has long criticized the DEA's involvement in hemp affairs, especially since the production of the crop was legalized on a federal level in 2018. Removing the DEA from the picture has been an ongoing battle as the agency has fought to remain a part of hemp regulation. The final rule on hemp, which takes effect March 22nd, still requires hemp testing at a DEA-registered lab. However, the regulation has been delayed until December 2022. Until then, the industry will likely continue to push to remove DEA influence from the industry. We really want to get the DEA out of the business of regulating hemp, says Jonathan Miller, General Counsel for US Hemp RoundTable. And he just so happens to be on our show today talking about Delta-8 THC. Stay tuned for that. Okay, here's a story from Arizona. This is in Hemp Industry Daily. Headline reads, Arizona hemp farmers see crop losses from Pythium in drip irrigated fields. The story says that farmers in Arizona found out the hard way that drip irrigation may not be the way to go for growing hemp crops in the state's arid climate. During the 2020 growing season, 85% of drip-irrigated hemp plants in Yuma and Graham counties showed symptoms of crown and root rot, a disease that leads to leaf yellowing and browning, sudden wilting, and plant death. Agronomists at the University of Arizona said the pathogen causing crop losses was Pythium aphanidermatum, commonly known as water mold, which thrives in damp environments and can infect hemp at any growth stage. Crown and root rot on hemp is often found in heavy soils with poor drainage, particularly in hot climates using plastic mulch and excessive irrigation. According to the agronomist study, infection can be minimized by ensuring crops are grown in soils with good drainage, regulating irrigation to prevent oversaturation, and removing mulch to reduce soil moisture. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency has not yet approved fungicides to help farmers manage Pythium on hemp. All right, and one more. This one is about a listening session, a webinar called What's Next for Industrial Hemp. It's hosted by PASA Sustainable Agriculture. And you know what? Let's just call up Hannah Smith Brubaker from PASA and find out more. Hannah Smith Brubaker, Executive Director at PASA Sustainable Agriculture. Welcome to the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm great, Eric. I'm happy to be joining you today.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here. So your organization, PASA Sustainable Agriculture, has a hemp event next Friday, March 26th. It's a webinar. It's a listening session called What's Next for Industrial Hemp. It's 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. Friday the 26th. It's a free event. And can you tell us some more about it?
Sure. Well, I think similar to most of our listening sessions, when we detect that in the community there might be a little bit of disconnect between state regulation or kind of rules of the game and where the community is sitting in terms of wanting to be creative and really using kind of the organic development of a new field to guide where farmers can go. And hemp is certainly one of those areas where a lot of the state regulations just haven't caught up to, and federal regulations, probably more so federal regulations, haven't really caught up to sort of the market potential for a product. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to have this listening session We'll have Josh Leidecker from the Susquehanna Hemp Company, Andrea Farrick from Ironwood Forestry, Sarah Mitchell from King's Agri-Seeds, and Phil Stober from Department of Agriculture. Really come on and just listen to what people have to say. We'll talk about how the federal hemp rule is impacting local growers. Hopefully talk about grant programs that are available through the state. We're having PDA on the call. And really just sort of what's in the works in terms of policy, investment, get some conversation going around it so that people can maybe be a little closer to being on the same page.
Oh, good. Okay. And people can register for it at passafarming.org?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And I'll put a link to that on the show page for this episode. And so maybe folks who are listening don't know what PASA is. Can you tell us what PASA is?
Sure. So PASA Sustainable Agriculture is a nonprofit organization serving farmers and ag professionals and supporters all engaged in this arena called sustainable agriculture. And so we welcome everyone to that conversation. And we have 7,500 members that have a network of about 60,000 across the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast, all working together to support farmers that really want to farm in a way that is ecologically sound.
That's good. All right. Well, Hannah, I appreciate what you are doing and what PASA is doing, and I thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Eric.
All right. I will have links to all of those stories, including that webinar on the show page for this episode at lancasterfarming.com. Okay, there's been a lot of talk lately in the industry and even on this podcast about Delta-8 THC and what that means for the industry. The US Hemp RoundTable last week issued a statement concerning the marketing of these products. So today we're checking in with Jonathan Miller, head counsel for the US Hemp RoundTable. Jonathan Miller, general counsel to the US Hemp RoundTable. Welcome back to our show. How are you doing?
I'm great. Good to be with you.
So last week, the US Hemp RoundTable released a statement concerning the marketing of hemp products, and the statement read, in part, the US Hemp RoundTable is opposed to marketing products under the guise of the hemp name for any intoxicating value or euphoric effect, calling it an irresponsible practice. So I assume that you're referring in part, at least, to the recent development and marketing of Delta-8 THC products. So what's at issue here, and why is it irresponsible?
Sure. So it's Delta-8 is the hot topic right now, but we're under the understanding that there are many other potential products that are being developed, and we wanted to be clear there's a bright line here, that on one side of the line are non-intoxicating hemp products that can be sold as dietary supplements and can be used by folks for their general health and wellness. And then intoxicating products, which are marijuana, adult use cannabis, other types of those products that are subject to a different regulatory regime, whether it's sold through dispensaries, but otherwise limited to adults who are either wanting to get high or using it for some other intoxicating benefit. So we're not calling for a ban of D8 or a ban of intoxicating products. In fact, there are several dozen states where it's legal to sell and purchase intoxicating products. It's just that they shouldn't be called hemp, and there should be a different regulatory regime for each.
So if hemp were to get you high now, that's sort of a problem for the overall hemp brand, because you've done so much work to say this is hemp, not marijuana, and then now it's sort of blurring those lines. So I understand why it's a concern. Do you have any safety concerns with how the compound is created or produced or processed and then applied to hemp?
Yeah, absolutely. And what the challenge is people are going into vape shops and gas stations and picking up something that says it's hemp and says it'll get you high, and there's no regulation of this, and there could be health risks. There certainly could be risks for intoxicating of minors or folks that are particularly sensitive to intoxication. So that's why it's important that these products be regulated in a way that protects consumer health and safety.
At what point do you expect DEA involvement or other regulatory action from the government, or if any?
Well, the DEA has already signaled that they are looking at taking action against synthetically developed products such as Delta-8. We're wanting to make sure that there's no overreach on the part of the DEA. They may be well-intentioned to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish, but conceivably, if a regulation or law is written too broadly, it could result in good products that are for the general health and wellness of folks to be made unavailable. So we're in meetings with the DEA. We're trying to schedule meetings with the FDA, and this is going to be a big subject for those discussions.
Right. Now, I know you're a lawyer, not a chemist, but can you explain sort of how this Delta-8 works, or like how it's, chemical compounds similar? I'm not a chemist either. I was an English major. How does this work? Where does it come from? What are they doing?
Yeah, I'm not that much of a scientist. I'm not a scientist, and I just know the basics, which are there is Delta-8 THC in every full spectrum product. There's a trace amount of a whole lot of different cannabinoids. The only way to get an intoxicating value for Delta-8 is to use some sort of chemical synthesis or chemical conversion. So you take CBD and perform some chemical synthesis or conversion, and it creates a high level of Delta-8, and so that is where the challenge is. And when you get chemicals involved, it becomes a concern to an industry that's focused on health and safety.
Right. So this is happening in a lab, not on a farm. It's not like you can buy genetics that are like Delta-8 genetics.
Correct.
Okay. Correct. What would you say to hemp farmers who've recently found Delta-8 as a legal way to sell their otherwise unsold hemp crop?
We're not proposing it be illegal, but that if you're wanting to use chemical synthesis and create a high intoxicating product, that it should be sold through the system of adult use cannabis. Marijuana dispensaries in the 30 plus states that currently have those products legal. We just simply do not agree with selling those kinds of products without regulation at gas stations and vape shops.
What would you say to farmers who are considering getting into this Delta-8 side of things?
I counsel patience. We are working on the federal level to try to ease the burdens on hemp-derived products, such as CBD or other non-intoxicating extracts. So we could use your help in getting legislation to pass Congress. Go to hempsupporter.com, and we've made it easy for folks to sign up for free and send emails directly to their members of Congress to urge them to support hemp-derived products. But again, if you're wanting to get in the intoxicating space, you're going to be very careful. Right now, it's a gray area. Right now, these products are arguably legal. So it might be a money-making opportunity right now, but I do know that there is a lot of political pressure to do something about it. And what's interesting is that the pressure is not just coming from us in the hemp industry, who are worried about the damage it does to the hemp brand, but the marijuana industry is opposed as well, because they have to go through all the regulations to sell their products in dispensaries. They hate the idea that there are competing products being sold unregulated in gas stations. So it really is a subject that unites folks from all sides of the spectrum.
Right. You mentioned a little bit about this in the beginning, but so Delta-8 isn't the only sort of alternate cannabinoid out there with some intoxicating effects. There's an article in the New York Times a couple weeks ago that talked about Delta-8, but then they mentioned Delta-10 at the end. So is this like some kind of THC Pandora's box? Will it just keep going?
Yeah, I'm understanding that Delta-10 is right around the corner, and there's a Delta-16 and Delta-32 or other, we're just going to continue to see this. And so we need to draw a bright line between intoxicating and non-intoxicating products.
All right, there you go. Jonathan Miller from the US Hemp RoundTable. All right, so today, as I mentioned, is St. Patrick's Day. Maybe it won't be by the time you're listening to this, but it is today, and I thought it would be great to go to Ireland. I spent a little bit of time there back in 2004 on my honeymoon. It's such a beautiful place full of wonderful people. So today I thought we'd celebrate St. Patrick's Day by talking about the Irish hemp industry. My guest today is Chris Allen, the Executive Director of the Hemp Federation of Ireland. Welcome to the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast, Chris, and happy St. Patrick's Day. How are you doing?
Thanks so much. I'm doing really well, and it's a pleasure to speak to you in Pennsylvania today.
Thank you. So I don't know much about hemp in Ireland, but I've done a little research. And where do things stand? It seems, from what I gather, your government isn't fully on board with the crop, and they're making it hard for the industry to grow and for farmers to make a living at growing hemp. And your organization is calling on Taoiseach Michael Martin to address the issue. So what is the issue? What needs to change? What should the government be doing that they're not doing now?
Well, Ireland has a very old hemp industry. We have one of the oldest hemp industries in Europe with a complete supply chain. And so we have farmers and processors and retailers here, stretching back to the 1970s, but a complete supply chain from the early 90s. And so that industry, just as a niche industry, just plodded along very happily until 2018, when suddenly the Irish government started to exercise misuse of drugs laws in relation to the agricultural crop. And so then we have, very much kind of very visible kind of targeting of retailers. And then you have in Ireland a very drugs orientated discourse in the media around him. And so going on from that, then we have just had the industry is pretty much disabled entirely in Ireland. So, for example, in April of 2020, the State Enterprise Agency adopted a policy whereby the only people who could access state enterprise support for any activities related to hemp, so not just the food, but the fibre, the seed, all of our entire industry. The only people who could access state support in relation to that was pharmaceutical companies. And so that's where it's at the moment in Ireland. And but happily, we do have the European Court of Justice ruling from November of 2020, and then also the European Commission's position on the World Health Organization vote at the UN then in December. So we're currently in Ireland in a very unique position in Europe, because Ireland is the only country in Europe that hasn't taken account of the Court of Justice ruling, or indeed the European Commission's subsequent statement that hemp is a food and is regulated under European food law. So it's a very bizarre and strange situation in Ireland, and probably best understood in relation to the huge cohort of pharmaceutical companies operating in Ireland. So I wrote an article for Health Europa at the end of last year, and I provided them a graph which shows that the pharmaceutical sector in Ireland is actually responsible for over 80% of all of our combined total exports. So that's a very powerful industrial lobby in Ireland.
Sure. But why would the pharmaceutical industry have any interest in, let's say, fiber hemp, for hempcrete, or for, the grain for food, or I don't, it's a disconnect to me. Why? It's just about money, huh?
It's about money. I mean, essentially, it's about controlling the CBD and cannabinoid industry. And so while the industry was entirely disabled, during the kind of late spring, early summer of last year, we also had a bizarre situation where the Central Bank of Ireland licensed an Irish domiciled investment fund to go about raising 150 million for investment in companies in the pharmaceutical and wellness sectors, including hemp. So, you know, it's really, I think, very much a question of stopping the growth of the national industry, so our own domestic sector. And then hand in hand with that, the Irish government is now proposing that we will have a fibre-only development of the hemp industry in Ireland. So I'm sure you're aware the landmass of the island of Ireland is tiny, absolutely tiny. And we also have then an extraordinary number of cattle and dairy cows and ruminant animals. So we've got the Climate Change Advisory Council, which is our government's expert advisors on the environment and on climate action. And they're currently reprimanding our government since 2018 about draining our peat bogs so as to grow fodder, so as to feed the number of cattle that we currently have on the island. And agriculture is responsible for more than a third of our combined total CO2 emissions in Ireland. And where the Irish government believes that they're going to find the land on the island to support a fibre hemp industry is just beyond ludicrous. So really, it's just a way of finally killing off the industry, I think. And then we have concurrently with that, in Ireland, we had at the end of the summer, the first pharmaceutical synthetic CBD food supplement launched on our market. And so that's one of two companies in Europe who have a synthetic lab-grown CBD, which of course doesn't involve the plant at all, on the market.
Oh, these are some sad things I'm hearing from Ireland.
Yeah.
I had no idea that the predicament was so dire there.
Yeah, it's very bad.
Huh. And so what's the path forward?
Well, I mean, we have a very, old, as I said, but also ethically, conscious grassroots industry in Ireland. And I believe that there are other such, hemp actors all around the planet, everywhere, in all of the countries. And since, I started to, or we as an organization started to, very forthrightly challenge what's happening here, I've been contacted by people all over the world who are experiencing very similar, I mean, maybe not quite so easy to see as it is in Ireland, but very similar kind of constructs around trying to stop the growth of the hemp industry from that grassroots level and send it off in another direction that's much more corporate facing and far less environmentally aware. Yeah.
From my research, I find that the cannabis plant thrives in community. So I would sort of venture to guess that they're not going to be successful in holding back that grassroots effort to bring this industry up.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. In 2018, when I came into this space in the first place, I was commissioned to do a piece of research for a company to submit to the Irish Oireachtas, which is our parliament. And so in that piece of research, what I did was I outlined what the economic potentials of the industry were, which is probably a mistake. But what I also outlined was the way in which the industry needs to be developed and as a fully integrated industry, taking account of all of its potentials and not privileging economic potentials over the other social and co-benefit potentials of the industry. And also that it needed to be integrated at local level. And it needed to be a community-based approach to the development of the sector. And especially for Irish farming, Irish farming is in deep trouble because of the amount of agrochemicals and various other practices associated with the huge amount of ruminant animal farming that there is here. And, hemp as well, if the farmers have access to the full use potentials of their crops, it's a viable living for farmers, and it's, a lifeline for rural communities as well. And like in America, here in Ireland and throughout Europe, there's huge succession issues in farming, and really the kind of demise of small farming is on the cards, whereas hemp is very exciting for younger farmers, and they're really interested in coming into it, and they're interested in the agroecological benefits. It's just such a wonderful industry, and it's just really sad to see governments not understanding that there's a new way of doing things, perhaps a better way, and it maybe doesn't involve corporate facing policies across the board.
Yeah, amen to that. So I imagine there's a lot of interest from farmers. Like what's the potential? Like how many farmers would be growing hemp if it wasn't so difficult?
Yeah, loads and loads and loads. So last year, at the end of 2019, we did a farmer outreach program. We went all around the country with our farm experts, and we had farmer information evenings just to kind of teach them a little bit about the growing of the crop and the harvesting and processing. And it was amazing because tiny little villages around Ireland, and we had these packed rooms, standing room only, and people had travelled the length and breadth of the country to come there and to hear about it. And then, so last year we had huge numbers of people applying for licenses to grow hemp in Ireland. But then the Food Safety Authority of Ireland published a report in February, so just before the growing season here. And in that report, they declared that CBD products, so really high quality CBD products on the market in Ireland were all dangerous. And they had a very visible media campaign where the CEO of that organisation was on national radio and in the newspapers telling everybody that these were really dangerous and that they shouldn't have anything to do with them. So then was our seed suppliers having cancelled orders all over the place, and so just pretty much destruction of the industry. And then following on from that, whenever they removed all the enterprise supports from the industry, what the state did then was they started to send drug squad detectives to the homes of people who bought hemp products. Oh. So we had these bizarre instances where people would come home. There was one man came home and found his mother and father at the kitchen table with with armed drug squad detectives and some more armed Gardaí upstairs searching the house for hemp. It's madness. Madness.
Yeah, I mean, you'd think they would have better things to do with their time and resources. The police.
You really would. And only a couple of weeks ago, I came across the place in Ballina in County Mayo in Ireland, where a man, I don't know who he is, but I just came across it and I thought, oh my goodness. So this poor man was convicted of criminal drugs charges for having 14 euros worth of industrial hemp in his pocket in 2018. in Ireland.
14 euros worth
Yeah,
of industrial hemp in his
yeah.
pocket.
I mean, it's bizarre and outrageous. Yeah, and it doesn't make any sense in a country like Ireland. I mean, we could have such a wonderful industry and a wonderful opportunity as well, because we are such an agricultural nation and food producer, and so yes, that's pretty bad here.
Yeah. How about bright spots? Are there any bright spots in the hemp industry in Ireland?
I think there are bright spots. In spite of all of that, I think we have a very vibrant industry here, in spite of all of that. So we have, companies who are very long-standing. So Hempire Building Materials, they've been going for, since the very early 90s. And that's Marcus McCabe. And then his wife, Kate, runs Kama Hemp, which is an amazing brand of food products from Ireland. So she has that, and then they together have processed, I'd say, maybe about 80% of all the hemp grown in Ireland over the past 2 decades or so. And so Marcus is an agricultural scientist, and he's a permaculture expert. And they do everything in that vein, really clean, really ethical farming, and completely organic products. And so that's kind of where the information comes from in Irish farming. So you've got an awful lot of people wanting to follow that down the road. Then you have, really new, vibrant companies coming in the CBD sector and the cannabinoid sector, and great innovations as well in Ireland. So there's an awful lot. It's just very unfortunate in Ireland that the state agencies don't speak to the industry experts at all. And so what you find is that the Irish government is regulating an industry that it doesn't understand. It has no clue about the science or the technology behind the industry, and but continues on regardless to introduce, highly inappropriate regulations and legislation around the sector. But and one of the great things, and I hope this happens more broadly as well, in terms of CBD regulation across the world and not just in Europe, but the CJEU ruling in the Canavape case in November. And what happened there was that finally, and at long last, somebody had to take account of the science. And, so that was the pivotal factor, that the European Court of Justice found that there was no valid scientific evidence to support any health concerns around the THC in cannabidiol derived from hemp. Mm-hmm. And because there was no health concerns, the court determines that cannabidiol and hemp-derived products are not controlled under the UN Single Convention. And because they're not controlled under the UN Single Convention, then they're not, they are entitled to exactly the same kind of safety net as any other safe legal product within the European trade zone. And so the problem with Ireland is that while every other European country came in line with that court ruling, Ireland has still not come in line with it and continues to arrest its industry stakeholders.
Oy, that's so frustrating. Yeah. So frustrating. Huh.
I know, but we do, as I said, have, very vibrant and very determined actors here in our industry. So we have a couple of companies, Hemp Federation Ireland companies, who have judicial reviews underway. So that will be that challenge, and hopefully that will protect the retail sector. And then currently our Minister for Agriculture is trying to split the farm license so that farmers can only grow fibre, and then presumably the pharmaceutical industry will be growing for CBD. So they're
Capture
trying to
the CBD side, yeah.
Yeah, they're trying to split our farm license at the moment. So there will be another legal challenge to that if they pursue that from Hemp Federation. So, I mean, hopefully at some point the European law will come into play and we will all be okay. Hopefully.
Yeah, let's hope for that.
Yeah.
Well, I wish you the best of luck in all of these endeavors.
Thank you.
And I wish you great success.
Thank you so much.
And it's very nice to meet you and talk to you today on this St. Patrick's Day.
It was lovely to meet you too.
All right, that was Chris Allen from the Hemp Federation of Ireland. That pretty much does it for today's show. Thank you all for listening. You can find links to all the things on the show page for this episode at lancasterfarming.com. You can always get in touch with me. You can send an email to podcast@lancasterfarming.com, or if you really want to go the extra mile, you can call my office phone and leave me a message. Call 717-721-4462, and I will either return your call or, I don't know, address your comments or whatever. I'm always looking for show ideas or great people to talk to or just to answer questions about the hemp industry. And keep in mind, we are now planning our summer road trip around these great United States. We're going to go to places like Kentucky and Nebraska and Montana, maybe Texas, maybe Oregon, who knows? It's sort of wide open right now. So if you have a business or a farm specializing in hemp fiber or grain, please get in touch, because that's what this tour is going to be. We're going to connect the dots of the hemp fiber and grain supply chain. We're going to shine a light on that side of the industry. And I'm going to go out and meet some people. It's going to be a fun trip. So stay tuned for more details on that. All right, so my name is Eric Herlock. I am the digital editor at Lancaster Farming Newspaper, the greatest agricultural newspaper in the world. I really appreciate that you listen to our show. This is such a great industry to be covering. It's full of fantastic people doing amazing things. So, all right. And you folks who are headed out to NOCO next week, tell Mara Spiegel I said hi. Maybe Bruce Michael Dietzen will be there. Check out that hemp car, that Renew sports car. Lots of great things. So, okay. Until next time, I will see you in the newspaper.
Industrial hemp.
Episode 125 of the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast is copyright 2021 by Lancaster Farming Newspaper, which is part of the Steinman Communications family. Today's show was written and recorded, edited, and produced by yours truly, Eric Herlock. The music you hear throughout the show is courtesy of Tin Bird Shadow. And just a special note that piece of music in the sponsorship spot from I&D Hemp is Tin Bird Shadow. It's from a live performance recorded at the 2019 Pennsylvania Hemp Summit, and it features Brad Hinton on guitar, Josh Scarman on the bass, Daniel Bauer on the drums, and Mike Borowski on the keys. Let me know if you're interested in hearing more of that live performance. That was a great night at that Pennsylvania Hemp Summit back in 2019 when people could congregate. Remember those days? All right, we're looking forward to it again.